Hi guys, this is Sandy from Austin. Today we're gonna tour Natural Bridge Caverns here in San Antonio. Let's go and watch.
Alright, so the tour that we're about to make our way on is going to be one that's going into our newest attraction here on the property. It's one that opened back in 2023. It's a cavern that has been locked away, hidden from the rest of the world. And so we're seeing a lot of very delicate formations, ones that you basically can't find anywhere else in the world. Making our way through the caves, and at the very end of our tour here, we also have a sound and light show to conclude it, as well as a conveyor belt up to the surface.
Thank you.
Of course. While our other one that we're going to be going into is a little bit smaller, it has a lot more rare formations. It's stuff that you basically can't find anywhere else on Earth.
Oh, that's nice. So how long is this tour?
About an hour long.
How long?
Yeah. Right over here, you'll notice this very, very large depression in the ground. This area is known as the sinkhole. Geologists theorize that this once was a large upper room of the caverns. However, about 5,000 years ago, there would have been a collapse, leaving behind this natural bridge that you see right through the tree line, which is where we get the namesake for the Natural Bridge Caverns. Underneath that bridge, you will see a trail that starts to make its way down to the depths below. That's the entrance to the Discovery Tour, that first attraction here on the property. Now, this cavern that we're going to make our way into, it wasn't discovered until 1967, but that story of discovery all actually begins way at our gazebo over here. So we're going to make our way on, go hear that story, that history, but before that we're also going to go over some rules, some disclaimers, things like that. This is just to help ensure y'all's safety as we make our way through the caves. Guys, this is y'all's tour. If you guys do have any questions at any point, if there's anything you want to do a little bit differently, make our way through more rooms slower, faster, we have the full luxury of doing that. I'll make sure to stick to that hour as best we can, but this is y'all's experience. You guys are basically my only guests, so we're going to have a lot of fun, but it's a very, very personal experience right now. So, if y'all are ready, gentlemen, we're going to make our way on. 70 degrees Fahrenheit, but it also contains a humidity of 99%, which make this cave feel a little bit hotter, more like 80 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. We're also about to walk our way down some very, very steep, some very, very, very wet steps. So please watch your step, use those handrails as we make our way down. I'm also going to ask you to keep in mind that we will be walking down over 190 steps below the surface. Good news, we do not have to walk up 190 steps to the surface. That is because we have the BAT, our Belt Assistant Transport. Sadly, it's not a giant flying mammal. Instead, it's a conveyor belt that'll take us from the depths of the caverns all the way to the surface to conclude the tour. I will say if you do have any mobility issues, I recommend walking up alongside it. It's not too bad, about 710 feet at a 19.3 degree incline. Gentlemen, I do this walk essentially every weekday and my calves look fantastic. Now we do have 5 very important rules for you. We're going to go through them rather quickly, that way we can get into the cave as soon as possible. But our first one is our most important one. Please do not touch any of our formations. That is because they're extremely fragile. A singular bit of human contact, even just the tip of your finger, will permanently damage them forever. Also, both of these caverns that we have here, they're national natural landmarks, meaning any intentional damage or vandalism done to these formations is illegal here in the state of Texas. Now our second rule is, please once again, remember to watch your step. I ask y'all to just keep in mind y'all's physical limitations, bad knees, bad backs, bad attitudes, recent surgeries, heart conditions, or claustrophobia. As we do make our way down, that is just because it can be somewhat strenuous. If for any reason y'all 3 decide you do want to leave early from this tour, make sure to let me know and we'll just head on out as we see fit. But nonetheless, our third rule is please remember that this is a one-way trip. We'll be entering from this gazebo right here, making our way down through the cave, and then leaving in an exit tunnel way on over yonder. We're not going back to any of the rooms that we do visit, so please make sure you take all valuable objects with you, phones, keys, wallets, hats, glasses, things like that, because if you leave it behind, you can't go back for it. Our fourth rule is one that I do not foresee being too much of a problem, but please remember we don't allow any food or drinks inside our caverns besides bottled water, so I'm going to ask you to please make sure you do finish that up beforehand, but nonetheless, just make sure you toss it in that trash can there at the entrance, or keep it sealed for the duration of the tour if you plan on bringing it. Our fifth, final, and my favorite rule, though, is to take pictures. Get some really cool photos, take lots of shots. We're going to be seeing a ton of really cool stuff on this tour. You're more than welcome to videotape or photograph me. I'm not picky. Have fun with it. But if you do see a cave critter, let's not use flash on them.
Okay.
They're not used to that bright flashing light. They'll very quickly get jumpy, which makes you get jumpy, which makes me get jumpy, and
Got
it's
it.
not good for anyone. But as long as I'll keep that in mind, we'll be all safe, set, and good. Now, do you guys have any questions so far?
No.
Excellent. Alrighty. Well, enough of the rules then. Let's get to the fun things, right? The science and the geology of this entire area all around us. Is because we are standing on what is known as a karst landscape. K-A-R-S-T. Karst. All formed from eroded limestone. Now there are three very distinct landforms in that karst landscape. Sinkholes, caverns, and aquifers. Well, that sinkhole that we passed by earlier over there, great example of one of those landforms. But underneath it, a natural cave opening, like the one that you see on this picture here. Now, the cavern that we're going to make our way into, like I did say earlier, it had no natural opening. In fact, we didn't even know it existed until the late 60s. But that story of discovery all involves this very winch right here. But that story of discovery all begins with exploration, done in that first cavern by the original family, who still owns the property to this day. The Wiest family. Now, when they were looking around in their sinkhole, they were trying to find extra rooms, extra leads, ways into the depths below. But sadly, they didn't find anything, jack squat. But they did not give up. One of their leading developers, Jack Birch, realized that that sinkhole is not how that cave system is supposed to end. And he believed there was something else off in the south region over here. So he started looking around, checking under trees and under boulders, and again, found nothing. But they did not give up. They started to drill down deep into the earth, going down 200 feet, using 6-inch wide diamond-tipped drill bits. On that first drill down, absolutely nothing. Second drill down, nothing. Third drill down, again, nothing. But on the fourth drill down, going finally down to 80 feet below the surface, the drill bit that they had been using had dropped. Well, that had gotten them very excited, because it meant that there might be something down there for them to check out. However, they were very cautious, as there wasn't they were on the last of their budget, meaning that, well, it was hit or miss. So what they did is they decided to hire a photographer from New Braunfels, Texas, to give them a pretty good understanding as to what was down there, and they dropped that camera down that 80-foot hole. And they took 4 photos, one in each of the cardinal directions. They then brought that camera all the way back up to the surface. Everyone gathered around and was super excited to check out those photos until they remembered it was the 60s and they had to get them developed. So they sent them off for about a week, finally getting these 4 old-timey shots back. But as they do light up, you'll notice the first 3 of which are going to be very, very, very similar to each other. They're a pale white. However, this last one is pitch black. Well, that last one got them super excited because it meant that as that flash from that camera went into that void space, it meant that the light didn't have enough time to make its way back to the lens before the shutter had closed. So they had to go see what was down there. They widened up that hole to 22 inches wide, stuck this very winch and manhole cover right over it, and lowered down 3 explorers into the depths below, and a trip looked a little like this. Getting lowered down 80 feet below the surface of the earth. Now those 3 original explorers, gentlemen, are actually right here forever immortalized in this placard. Reginald Wiest, one of our original owners, Miles Kuykendall, one of the tour guides here back in the 60s, and Jack Birch, that leading developer himself. And they went down on a trip that you can actually see from right where you're standing. If you take a look, all the way through the tree line over there in the distance, you will see a large green sign marking the Hidden Caverns well shaft number 4. That is the exact spot that they made their way down. In fact, we'll see that connection point on one of the stops on this tour. Those cave critters that I was pointing out, you can actually find some of them right here. If you take a look right up above you, you will see giant swarms of cave crickets. Now, these little bugs don't make any noise. Not a singular sound. But the reason for that is because they're a prey-like species in one of the only environments where the predator, commonly being bats, is one that's going to use sound to see. And so because of that, they don't want to make noise. Now we are going to continue to make our way on. As we do make our way on deeper though, once again, just watch your step, use those handrails. You'll be hearing me repeat that phrase a lot on this tour. It's out of caution, I promise you. On my first ever time doing this job, I got down to the step and I went right under myself. So I'm a very, very cautious tour guide when it comes to this job. So this is all going to be limestone formations around us here. A lot of these different formations actually more scientifically are known as speleothems. But you might have already heard about 2 of our most famous ones, those being stalactites and stalagmites, but if you do need a refresher, our stalactites are going to be very commonly up on the ceiling above us, hanging tightly to it. However, down on the ground below y'all, as well as on many of the far walls around us in this room and basically this entire cavern, you will find the stalagmites. Now these stalagmites, they might reach the ceiling as they grow up, hence the name. Now, all these very pretty formations, each one of them is all growing from the exact same process, a process known as calcite deposition. Now, before I do talk about it, I do want to welcome y'all to our Jeremy room. Right here, we're standing at a depth of about 60 feet below the surface. Now, in this area, that depth is very sort of well established in just kind of how cool this entire room is. Now, all around us, you are seeing those formations I was talking about, but the way that they grow is from a process known as calcite deposition. That process all starts off as rock, water, and time. And that rock, water, and time all begins with rainwater that makes its way down through the atmosphere, picking up carbon dioxide along the way. And it turns into a slightly acidic liquid known as carbonic acid. That makes its way down deeper and deeper into the soil until it eventually finds limestone, all this very beautiful rock that you see around us, where it will actually dissolve away at it, picking up a lot of the different minerals within it. But the most notable one, and the most important one of which, is that calcite. That, picked up in with that acid in the water, will then make its way down deeper until it finds a ceiling, much like the one above us, where then that water will do one of three different things. It'll either hit, drip, or flow, slowly depositing that calcite in all the formations around us to slowly grow, crystallize, and develop everything around here at a very slow average growth rate of about 1 cubic inch for every 100 years. That is about the size of a singular ice cube worth of growth for every century. So imagine your refrigerator making one singular ice cube every 100 years, slowly stacking them one on top of the other.
So any idea like how long back this all started up?
So we do know that this cavern all started up back on its growth process around 20 million years ago. Mind you, that process originally starting off would have been because of a giant fault line shift and a huge earthquake. We'll hear a little bit more about that when we do make our way on deeper. But we'll talk about a lot more of that sort of process down at the bottom of the room because we're able to get a very kind of cool view of some of that effect that is caused. But as we do walk our way down, we're going to be seeing a ton of different kinds of formations. Broomsticks, stalagmites, soda straws, cave curtains, cave ribbons, cave draperies, cave baking, cave popcorn, and even down here at the bottom of this area. All the way down there on the left, you'll actually find an area that we'll soon come across known as the Diamond River. It's an area that contains the largest calcite crystals in the cave. However, before we do make our way on, any questions? Perfect. We're going to make our way on. What cracks that had formed, or is it more of a sandstone where it's like very compacted sand and sediment that creates somewhat similar shapes, but not all that similar formation growth? Or do they look very similar to this as well?
No, it's not of this sort.
More barren?
Yeah, more.
So those are the broomstick formations. These ones are these very thin stalagmites. These ones here actually connect all the way to the ceiling and it's known as a broomstick column, but they get that name because you look at the bottom of them, looks a little bit like a broom handle. And so because of that, they get that very sort of elegant name to them. However, you will notice a lot of these formations basically all over this room and all over this cave because they've been able to be growing undisturbed for however many thousands, if not millions of years. So right here at the second placard, on that picture there, you're seeing Reginald Wiest himself when he first made his way into the cave. Now, I want you to take one note about this photo is that he's wearing a flamelit lamp on his head, an old carbide lantern. These lanterns were used very commonly by prospectors and miners back in the early 50s, but we still use them back in the 60s as they had the very wonderful added benefit of being able to be used as soot markers, where you could basically put an arrow inside the cave telling you which way you want to go. However, the reason why this picture is so notable is because if you take a look right up above it, you will see the fourth well shaft. This is the exact spot those three explorers made their way down. Now remember, this trip was done back in 1967. This would have been before we had a lot of these readily available equipment. And so those lanterns that they had on their heads, imagine that if one of them had gone out, they'd be stuck down here in complete and total darkness, not even able to see an inch in front of their faces. Now, one other final thing I do want y'all to take note of, though, is that if you take a look at this wall right here, and notice this hole is so very close to it, and if this hole that was drilled here was even 3 feet farther back into that wall behind it, they would have never found this place to begin with, which kind of shows you how lucky we are to be in a spot like this. Now we are going to continue to make our way down. When we do make our way down to the bottom of the Jeremy room, we'll be making our way to a depth of about thin stalactites up here. All these formations inside this cavern get to an average length of about 6 feet long, and each and every one of them is extremely thin, extremely narrow, extremely fragile, about as fragile as glass, and they're all hollow in the middle. Meaning that in theory, if you could break one off from the ceiling, put it into a can of soda, you could drink from it. We don't recommend it though, as you would be committing a third-degree felony, but you could, hence the name soda straws. Do you have what?
Cameras.
Not in here, no. No. Most of the time whenever it's a lot more people, we just kind of keep an eye on people, and then we do our best to like monkey see monkey do it.
So this is owned by those guys, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not under
no government ordinance.
Recreation.
It's private property, and because of that, we're able to do a lot better at enforcement of our rules and our laws. We're able to do a lot better job at sort of keeping things safe here. It's also why we're able to actually do different things when it comes to like keeping this cave safe.
Funding, isn't it? If it is national park and
Yes and no. The issue that we run into is because the National Park Service doesn't do as good of a job at protecting its wild spaces like we do here. Because we're privately owned, we can do a lot better job than they can.
Safari on the side, is it national park?
No, privately owned as well.
The same owner?
So different owners. It was the grandfather of the current generation of the owners. When he passed away, he left all of his property to one of his children. And then they split the property, and they gave part of it to his sister, who then opened up the wildlife ranch. Now, we have our caves, we're very happy with it, but we do very commonly do collaborations with them. It's like on those tickets that you guys got, there's a discount for it for the safari. Now, down here, you can see a lot of these very beautiful formations. Things like our draperies along this back wall over here, up above more of the soda straws, but down there on the left is that Diamond River, the area containing the largest calcite crystals in our cave. Now, the main reason why we did stop down here, though, isn't really to talk about all this cool stuff. It's actually to talk about the rest of the Jeremy room up above and behind me, where you will see a very, very unique perspective of our room. And you're starting to notice a very distinct sort of dome-like shape to this ceiling. That is because this area is known as a breakout dome. It's one of the most stable structures you will find in a cavern space. And it's all marked and identified by these giant limestone boulders here on the ground. Each and every one of them was actually once attached to the ceiling above us, but had fallen many thousands of years ago in a process known as collapse modification. Now, that does sound very concerning, right? But don't worry, we are perfectly safe in here. And the reason why we know that is because on top of all these boulders, you will see that there is a lot of formation growth. So, pop quiz. Do y'all remember the average growth rate of those formations?
Yeah, a few million years. Right?
1 cubic inch for every 100 years. And so keeping that in mind, you can then imagine that this room has likely been in its current and stable position for a very, very long time. Now, I do keep talking about a lot of this limestone on this tour. Why is it so important? Well, it's actually because it's what this entire cave is made out of. In fact, all this limestone that is here had formed over 100 million years ago. This would have been back actually during the Cretaceous period when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. During that time, though, this area of Texas above us would have actually been covered in water as a warm and shallow sea. During that time, though, those different plants, animals, organisms, things like algae, shellfish, they'd make their way to the bottom of that seabed, and they'd start to get mixed in with the sands, the dirts, and the sediments, slowly getting compressed and pushed down deeper and deeper, layer by layer, into all these very beautiful layers of limestone that you see around us. In fact, this entire cavern that we've been walking through, at one point in time, many millions of years ago, would have been all solid rock, and there would have been no cave here. But what had changed was about 20 million years ago, and the fault line shifted. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because limestone can only be formed underwater. Now, not only can limestone only be formed underwater, at the very, very tippy top of Mount Everest itself, the highest point on Earth, we find layers of limestone. And it all got there due to the plate tectonics, that shifting of the Earth. Now, in that area of Nepal, it was originally underwater, but it slowly got pushed up higher and higher, taller and taller. However, in this area, we obviously don't have a mountain, so what happened? Well, those plates tried to slide past each other, but they eventually got caught and snagged. Started to build up enough friction, force, and kinetic energy that they would eventually snap, creating a giant seismic wave, a huge earthquake, allowing joints and faults to form above us, basically a giant crack that allowed water to seep its way deep into the earth here. And that water would slowly erode away at all these rooms, carving them out, making them larger and larger, wider and wider. And in certain instances, that water would make its way deeper to a new area, carve out a new room, and those would erode away, getting larger and larger, wider and wider. And slowly, they would become to about the size of the rooms that we are now standing in. And after that water was left to drain away, it meant that this cavern was finally left at least relatively dry. Because of that, it meant that all these formations around us could grow. Each and every one of them has been growing for many, many thousands of years before any of us were on this earth. And each and every one of them is going to continue to grow for many, many more thousands, if not millions of years, long after we are all gone from this place. Gentlemen, do y'all have any questions for me so far? Active caverns that we have in many different spaces are ones that are continuously growing to this day. You'll notice there's a lot more water dripping in them, that humidity is still in there, and each one of them is slowly growing the formations. However, a dormant cavern doesn't necessarily mean that it's dead. It just means that there isn't enough water able to make its way into the earth to carve these formations around us and to slowly create all of them. And because of that, it lies essentially dormant. And notice that the humidity in dormant caverns is technically, or most of the time, going to be a lot less noticeable. It'll be a lot less humid, and there will be a lot less water, as well as most of the time those formations are much smaller. That is just due to how little water makes its way into that area. It's very few. There's a couple of them that you will find in this area of Texas, but not too many of them. Ours just happens to be one of the biggest active caverns that we have in the state. Because of that, we're very, very proud of all these formations, and each one of them might even connect at some point. Like this one right up here will take almost 600 years to fully connect together. All for that tiny little bit of space, 600 years. This one over here is about the same, as well as this one. But all of these will connect.
But there is so much. What if there is so much rain, right?
If there's enough rain, that drip rate will pick up. What would happen is there would be more calcite that does get deposited. However, at the same time, it does bring down a little bit too much CO2 in there. And so because of that, it also creates that acidic property and sort of flattens out those formations. That's why you'll notice on a couple of them, there's sort of small divots in them, like at the tops of them. That's just due to how much water was dripping on them at one point in time.
Water doesn't flood here?
No, it doesn't flood. However, this cavern does fill. Now, my distinction of that is actually because you'll never find water basically cascading in from the ceiling. What'll happen with this area is water will start to rise from one of the deepest basins of this cavern, slowly getting higher and higher until it eventually makes its way over the trails. Mind you, we would have to have hurricane levels of rain. Like, it would have to be typhoons and lots of almost like weeks upon end of rain. The last time we had that happen was back in Hurricane Harvey back in late 2010s. That would have been the big one that brought in a lot of water. I think that was the highest the cavern had filled up. Hurricane Katrina that we had all the way back in early 2000s.
Destroy any formation?
No, thankfully not. Most of what happened is just with how much water there was in there, it just kind of basically filled this place, but it didn't really damage any of the formations, which we're very grateful for. So this is the broom closet. This area contains the largest quantity of broomstick formations in the cave. All these ones we've already seen before, but these ones you'll notice have a very distinct sort of wax-like look to them. That look is actually due to the fact that this entire space here is actually just a very specific composition of that calcite, acid, and water all making its way down here. And because it makes its way in here in such a specific ratio, it creates that very waxy-like look to it, which is why I also like to sometimes refer to this area as the candle room. Unfortunately, I don't have naming rights. Vegetation all on the surface. And as it died and decayed, the natural erosion process would have brought a natural dye down here in the form of humic acid, Humic, dyeing these rocks. Now over here, on the left side of the room, where you see a lot more pale colors of yellow and white on all these different formations, that is actually showing you a long period of time where there was the opposite. Not a lot of plants, animals, or vegetation, when the earth up above would have looked quite a lot more like an arid desert. Now, during that total darkness, and when y'all first made your way into this area, you were probably hearing a very faint sort of ticking noise going on. In fact, it's still happening right now. That noise is all coming from this wonderful science experiment right over here, done in collaboration with UT Austin in Austin, Texas. Now, what they're doing is they're studying the effect of climate on our formation growth. But the way that they've done that is quite clever. What they've done is they've sanded down a glass plate to the exact grit of this calcite deposition process. And every couple of months, they will find a small amount of formation growth on top of it. Now they'll take it off, bring it to their university, and they'll study it under microscopes. And what they've learned is that during the winter months, when the air is a lot colder, a lot more frigid, that formation growth rate will actually speed up and grow at a relatively faster rate. However, during the summer months, when the air is a lot hotter, a lot more humid, that formation growth rate will actually slow down to the point that might even stop growing entirely. All of that learned from this tiny little glass plate right here. Gentlemen, up above y'all's heads, you're able to spot a very beautiful set of formations, ones that I've already pointed out actually a couple of times. It's our soda straws. Now, we have already told y'all that these are very, very thin, very narrow, very fragile, and also hollow in the middle. However, inside the Hidden Wonders Cavern, these formations get to an average length of about 6 feet long. Inside the Discovery Cavern, right next door, they only get to an average length of about 6 inches long. Do you guys have a guess as to why there's so much of a difference? It's because everything's bigger in Texas. I'm just kidding. The real reason is because this cavern had been left sealed off. And because it was left sealed and hidden away from the world, it meant that a very certain and wonderful critter was never able to make its way into this place and knock them down. That, of course, being bats, who would fly around in complete and total darkness, using their echolocation to see. Now that sound wave, as it would bounce off the walls, it would hit their ears, telling them that there was something there. But with the soda straw formations being hollow, meant that as that sound wave would go off, it would just pass right through it. The bats wouldn't see anything there. So very commonly, they'd be flying around, then they'd, bam, hit a formation, fall to the ground. They would get back up again, fly around, hit another one, and fall to the ground, but that process would repeat itself on end, leaving all these formations at a very, very short 6 inches long. Now, inside our other cavern, we used to have a bat colony that did live in there. That was many, many thousands of years ago. In fact, almost 5,000 years ago. However, after that sinkhole collapsed, leaving behind the natural bridge, they moved out. Not too far though, only about a mile down the road, to the Bracken Bat Cave. That bat colony that's inside that cave now is actually the largest colony of bats in the world, with 20 million Mexican free-tailed bats in a singular half-mile of caves. Not only is it the largest colony of bats in the world, it is the densest and largest colony of mammals in the world. Within a singular half-mile of cave, all 20 million of those bats. Now that cavern's average temperature is around 110 degrees Fahrenheit. It is hot. It is extremely, extremely hot in there. And because of that, they actually use it as their maternity ward, a place to raise their young. But also within that space, there's about 60 feet of bat droppings, or bat guano, just from floor to ceiling, all there. Now, we do actually offer an opportunity during our summer months to go check out that bat flight as they would leave for their evening hunt in what essentially looks like a giant bat tornado. If you're interested, check out YouTube for largest bat colony in the world. Give you all the information there. It'll show you some videos of it. But if you come back in town, if you get a chance to come back to San Antonio, especially during the summer months, like next summer, check it out. It's a really cool thing to see.
So I know there is this downtown bridge where the bats.
Yes, the Austin Bridge.
Austin Bridge.
Yes, so that's actually part of this colony. That is what we like to call, so we like to call this cavern, the one that's right next door, the maternity ward. It's where all the mothers raise their young. But that one, we call it the bachelor pad. Because that's where all the male bats go to roost for the summer months until the females have their young and they start migrating back south for the winter. Any other questions? Excellent. When our three explorers got down here, they saw this and thought that it looked a lot like a pipe organ. And so where do you most commonly find pipe organs? But in cathedrals, hence the name the cathedral room. But down over this handrail, you're actually able to see the deepest point of the cave at a depth of 200 feet below the surface. Down there, it's an area known as the Cathedral Canyon. It is filled with a lot of really slick, really hard to walk on rock, and a lot of what we like to call here in Natural Bridge Caverns, Texas boot-sucking mud. And I like my clean shoes. So instead of going down there, we're going to be making our way through this man-made corridor up ahead, known as the Critter Corridor. It tells you all about the natural wildlife that does live in our cave system, each and every one of them that has adapted in some sort of unique way. Many of them have lost their pigmentation and their colors. Others now mimic the cave walls around us, but others, like those crickets that we saw at the beginning, they don't make that noise. Now, as we do make our way down to see them, just ask you to please keep your arms by your side. That is just because there are no handrails in this area, but If y'all are ready, we're gonna make our way on, unless y'all do have any final questions. That cat skeleton sort of to forever immortalized what our discovery had been. Now, right over here is actually what is represented as an ancient cat, about 11,000 years old. We believe it to be actually a Paraguayan river cat. However, another one that was discovered was right over here. This skull. This skull that you see depicted in the ground right here is another one of the cat skeletons. This one was actually discovered 13,000 years old, but this one we believe to belong to a jaguarundi, a subspecies of the jaguar cat. Much smaller, more house cat sized. Now, those are most of the fossils that we have found in this place. There's a couple areas inside our caves that do have walls that have fossils within them. There aren't too many of them just due to how little fossils do actually form. What very few there are is just able for us to find. We just haven't found too many. Now, this area that we are now standing in is actually known as the ballroom. And this area is at 170 feet below the surface. And you're noticing this area is a very, very, very big, large room with a very distinct dome-like shape to this ceiling. That's because this area is, once again, another breakout dome, very similar to that Jeremy room that we were first in. But the reason why you're also starting to notice that there are no formations in this area is because of all of this rock up above us. All up there is what is known as a layer of dolomite or dolomitic limestone, a very, very magnesium-rich layer of rock that is super dense. In fact, it creates a non-permeable layer above us, acting like an umbrella. And because of that, it means all that water and calcite gets pushed off towards the sides, which is why the only sort of formation growth you can find in this area is these white stripes along the walls around us, as well as, all over here, one singular flowstone formation on this side of the room. Now, this area, not only do we call it the ballroom, we can actually also use it as a ballroom. This is our public and private event space inside the cave. We host a lot of different things: corporate dinners, banquets, galas, auctions, birthday parties, even weddings after hours. However, we also do public events, concerts in the caverns, cave yoga, and holiday dinners. The last time we did have one of those holiday dinners was back on Valentine's Day. It was known as our Deeply in Love event. I know it's cheesy, but we were able to turn all the lights in from a bright shade of pink to really set the mood. It was really, really cool. However, we also do have a couple more events coming up later this season, 2 more concerts in the caverns, as well as 2 more of those cave yoga events. If you're interested and you have time and you're in town, highly recommend checking out. It is a really fun way to experience the caves.
Does the music or loud sounds impact any of these?
No, thankfully not. The natural acoustics of this area and of this room naturally keep all that sound together. We've tested it quite a lot, as well as we have, I believe, close to about 10 or 12 concerts now since we first opened this attraction back in 2023. And because we've had so much experiences with music in here, we know that it is safe. We know that it's perfectly fine to have that sort of experience.
Actually, it's because of, it's a closed space. A lot of echo and
It is. I mean, you'll notice that this area, especially if I get rather loud, it does have a good natural acoustics to it. Because of that, we're able to do events like this. We're able to do big public speaking events as well. It's really good for if you're doing like an auctioneer thing, because it's very, very easy to sort of hear everything from every different side of the room. Because all I have to do, instead of just kind of like keeping it more to like a normal conversation size, is just go big, boom, loud, and then it's, you can hear everything. Now this area, it also does contain one extra special thing. It's our claim to fame here with the Hidden Wonders Tour. That is because we are the first and only show cavern in the country to have a sound and light show to conclude our tour experience. This light show is an artistic representation of how our caves formed. It shows you those hundreds of millions of years of ancient history. First with our warm and shallow sea, creating all the limestone, that shifted the bedrock 20 million years ago, allowing the water to carve its way into the earth, creating these rooms. Those rooms then, of course, draining away, allowing our formation growth to start. But then finally, you'll be able to see the modern day exploration as well as all the scientific discoveries that we do inside the caverns. All of which learned in the span of 3.5 minutes. Gentlemen, y'all are more than welcome to record this slideshow. It is a truly once-in-a-lifetime kind of experience. However, I do highly recommend keeping your flash off. That is because if it is on, it does ruin your own effect, but that camera's perfect. But if you do shoot with your phone, make sure you keep that light off. There is also some bright lights, flashing lights, and loud noises. So if you are sound sensitive or light sensitive, please keep that in mind. It's about 10 seconds of bright flashing lights. After that, it's pretty smooth transitions from there.